purpose of just helping people have these conversations about these compounds that are highly stigmatized. And I recently participated in a clinical trial. I think that's in my bio here. So that it could help facilitate me speaking about these things. That was my intent with the clinical trial, just so I could have that that seal of approval that I've done psilocybin. It was FDA, DEA approved. Just a little more protection for my license there. But I have a TikTok channel, Instagram, YouTube, the Mushroom Nurse or the Mushroom Nurse Collective, where I just have conversations about these things and talk about the science. Yeah.
Hi, Sharon. I'm not sure if we lost you there for a second.
No, I was done. I muted myself.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I think that's everyone. Sue, you didn't get a chance to introduce yourself, did you?
Who are you talking? I just finished introducing myself. I don't know if you guys lost me for that.
Sue.
Oh,
Yeah, I
okay.
was asking
Yeah,
about
no,
Sue.
I didn't get a chance, and I'll just be real brief. So I have been involved with psilocybin in various ways for over 40 years. I am a nurse. My interest in this now is more in empowering patients, trying to be a bridge between kind of the non-traditional to the traditional Western medicine. I'm also been doing a lot of research on kind of using more natural products for our patients and seeing how we can impact effluent into the water sources, and some of the drugs that we use, the psychoactive drugs, do end up in the water sources, and I'm looking into more plant medicine for that.
Sorry. Thank you so much for introducing yourselves. We have one more person who's joining our panel, Colby, who is a pharmacist, and I'm not seeing him on right now. So I think what we'll do is just go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone. We may have more people joining us. This is a 1-hour conversation. This is a virtual town hall with plant medicine medical activists. So people in the medical field from all different backgrounds who are interested in plant medicine, care about plant medicine, and are here for the movement. Interested in psilocybin is more the subject today. But because the hour can move very quickly, Fernando, who's a doctor in the Seattle area, has offered to help and help support the conversation and keep it going. But we'd like to have a balance of questions. So in the chat, if you can go ahead and put the name of the person you're asking the question to, that would be helpful. And if we see a preponderance of questions for someone who's just super tantalizing to the viewer, we might spread it out a little bit because we want to be fair and equitable. But we're going to start off with our first general question. You have 5 minutes to answer, so panelists feel free to dig in and whatever you can cover in 5 minutes. And the first question is really, when did that passion start for you? When did that moment or that time, whatever was going on in your life, whether it was grief, whether it was your own personal healing, whether it was a transcendental experience you had in India at an ashram, but what was it? What was it spread out? What was that moment where you became passionate, enthused, caring about psychedelics or specifically psilocybin? How did it affect your life? And I'm sure it can't be compressed into 5 minutes, but if you go over a little bit, that's okay. And we really want to hear from you. So for the rest of us, let's maybe try to mute ourselves so that we're giving as much bandwidth as possible so people can hear the speaker clearly. Thank you. Go ahead, take it away. Fernando, you want to start?
Okay. I guess the question was, what inspired me to do it? Well, I've always been interested in the inner journey. I think I might be even a little autistic, but I'm interested in emotions, the inner journey. I've had a kind of a spiritual bent as a young kid. I wanted to know what else is going on besides, this three or four dimensional world we live in. And I just found some doctors at a free clinic, asked them to guide me through it, and I got started. I don't really have anything, you know.
Does the camera work on this thing?
No, it doesn't.
Oh, the camera.
That's about it.
What's
Yeah,
that?
yeah, that's about it.
Okay.
I'm on Town Hill.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Sue, do you want to take the next?
Sure, I will. My name is Sue, and I am a nurse working in Western medicine. And I have been very interested in plant medicine and specifically psilocybin for a long time. I I was involved in it in more of the recreational use back in my 20s. Um, and at that time, I started noticing the profound effect that it had on the community of people I was involved in. And after I would hear a lot of stories of really changing, life changing trips that would lead to better mental health. So it's always been in the back of my mind in my nursing practice. And throughout years of emergency and trauma nursing, I've also seen um, where I thought something like psilocybin would really be helpful, knowing that it's kind of more of an active pathway for healing, just in my own experience, uh, than more like a passive way of healing. So that's what started me. And then looking into as it becomes more and more mainstream or in the media, of course, I gravitated immediately to it, and have been involved with providers that have done a little bit of uh, psilocybin therapy. And I think that one of the things that I hold as one of my values in my practice is empowerment, and in involving patients in their own journeys, as our other Fernando said. And I feel like that's something that psilocybin and psilocybin therapy offers. And as citizen science is turning more into real science, if you will, uh, I think that it's being seen for the empowering and active source that it is. Also, in this same thing, and my concern for empowering my patients and humans, I've also seen that uh, something that's always bothered me is how so many of the compounds and drugs that we use end up in our water sources. So SSRIs and some of the other compounds that we take are not changed and end up in our water sources. And that's a huge issue here in Puget Sound. I've been doing some research on psilocybin particular, especially for this, and there's not a lot out there right now. However, with cannabinoids, some of the synthetics are not broken down, but the natural ones are. So I did find a study that talked about this being done more over in Europe, and they are seeing that the natural psilocybin, which is then psilocin, once the body breaks it down, does break down into different components that are more natural for the system. So that's kind of what drives me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Sharon, do you want to go ahead and take it away?
Yeah, I came into the space by accident. I was very much a child of the DARE program, very much believed that if you did any psychedelics, you would jump off a building or go crazy. Until 2020, when I tried psilocybin recreationally and realized that none of those things that I learned were true. I had a very profound experience and very therapeutic, even though it wasn't a therapeutic setting. Or intent. And then fast forward to 2021, the world started to open up. I ended up hanging out with a doctor friend of mine and trying to explain to her like what had happened. I was trying to understand what had happened to my brain. I felt completely dismissed and sort of just it was a very, very frustrating experience that kind of sent me on this deep dive of investigating the science of these compounds and trying to learn what it was that happened to my brain, and realizing that there are so many people in the medical space that don't understand a lot about these compounds and are very much like myself 5 years ago, just believing that like, well, all drugs are bad because they're Schedule 1. So it's just been my passion to try to re-educate them as well as the public. And I just love talking about these things. So it's just been like deep dive, having conversations with other individuals, trying to destigmatize these in hopes that when there are other, referendums or changes on the ballot, that people that are making these decisions will be armed with more education and understanding of what actually is going on with these compounds when we consume them. Yeah, that's it.
I love your earrings. Thank you so much. Angela, go ahead, take it away. I've noticed not everyone is taking the full 5 minutes.
We're filling it in. We're going fast so we can get lots of questions in. For me, I am long before I was a nurse, a raver back in the day, and had some really transformational experiences in community spaces, but also was early on exposed to harm reduction in that culture. As I became a nurse, just before I became a nurse, I experienced a really traumatic loss in my life. I'm a bereaved parent and was diagnosed with PTSD, had some very difficult, yeah, PTSD is no joke for those that have suffered from that one. And I did a lot of work with healing around that, but it wasn't until I was invited to my first 5-MeO DMT ceremony that I had such a deep, profound healing experience for myself. When I came out of that experience, I felt so strongly that these medicines need to be made available for people in safe containers for the purposes that they find most important for them, and especially around healing. Um, Interestingly, as I've continued my education as a student at CIIS in the Certificate in Psychedelic Assisted Therapy program, also through synthesis, etc., I had an experience working in the hospital where I had a bad outcome that like re-exacerbated my PTSD. And that happened shortly before my first ketamine training. I was so surprised to learn in that ketamine training how impactful ketamine was for my experience of healing. And I really recognize that there are many plant medicines available to us. Psilocybin is probably the most easy to access for sure. But what really motivates me is providing quality psychedelic care, education, harm reduction, and benefit maximization for the public. The reality is people are working with these substances through recreational to deeply therapeutic processes, whether that be at whatever changes in their life, at the end of life while dying, or just to have deeper connections to self or community. And everybody really deserves to get this out of the dark ages, the dare times where people couldn't talk openly about their experiences. And so therefore they weren't able to really understand how to do this in a safe, mindful way. I'm really interested in bringing legalization and decriminalization forward so we destigmatize psychedelic use, can actually return it to what it was. It was an essential part of society and communities for our entire history throughout cultures across the world. So as a psychedelic educator, I'm very interested in teaching nurses and other practitioners how to really develop a code of ethics around proper care and attunement to the people we're caring for, and really interested in building community of other practitioners working collaboratively to support people in the way that feels best to them. So that's what motivates me. Thanks.
Thank you, Angela. Jonathan, can you go ahead?
So I've I think that my story has some similarities to a lot of the folks have already spoken. I I had a accidentally therapeutic experience that was in a set and setting that had no control around it at all at a music festival, and this was when it was in 2017. So I was midway into my 30s already, had a similar upbringing, drugs are bad, acid will eat a hole in your brain, all of the kind of mythology that has come through a manipulation of the scientific literature through the lens of the the war on drugs. Anyway, that kind of like set off a lot of like curiosity in my system and has sort of cued quite a bit of a spiritual awakening. And so a lot of my openness and uh, diving into the psychedelic world has also coincided with diving into spirituality and what is consciousness. And so they've gone hand in hand for me. And as this process is happening, there's this spiritual awakening happening, I began to see more how practices that we have in the Western medical system are I forget who it was. I think maybe it was Sue who was talking about how it disempowers severely disempowers the people that we're working with. And in so many other parts of healing work, different other lineages, whatnot, the the healer is doing the healing to themselves and also sharing that work that they have done with themselves with everyone else. And this is totally not what's happening in the Western medical system. And so I've this has become my passion, which is to empower folks to use insights that they glean from experiences like this, from other spiritual experiences, to like take some more control over their healing journey and not just over their turn it over to people who are in like positions of power or people who have more training than them. Um, yeah, I could keep going for a long time, but I feel like that's a good synopsis.
Okay, great. And then I know, Mira, you have attended a training to be a therapist that's trained in the field. Do you mind just speaking real quick, even though you're not necessarily a medical professional in the same way, just to share with folks your background? I mean,
Yeah,
you don't have to.
yeah, sure. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and last year I did the Integrative Psychiatric Institute's training to be a psychedelic assisted psychotherapist, and I currently work above board with ketamine assisted psychotherapy, and I do that with people. Um, I have a lot of ambivalence about all the gatekeeping um I respect people not wanting it to be in the hands of people that are quote unquote more trained. And yet I think um I'm really sensitive to my own ethical standard of of being somebody who does no harm and talks about touch and is really intentional about all the things. So I feel like I have sort of a both and sort of relationship to it. I come to it just as a therapist who is healed and has been healed by psychedelics in my own personal experience, and also wanting to be able to offer that to people and really sort of, I've always called myself a slut to healing. I just want healing to be available, and I don't care particularly how it works. I want people to be able to feel like alive and have agency and feel meaning in their lives. And so I got into psychedelics because it felt to me like it helped me with that. I had a long-standing kind of dysthymic personality and just a kind of low rent kind of depression that was kind of always there. And I feel that less and less because of my own journeying. I have a guide who's not licensed, and I think they're one of the most ethical people I know. So I really don't think license is the thing. I do really value an ethical frame to sort of do this work with for me to do work with that meets an ethical standard inside myself. Yeah. I don't know if that answers the question. I just feel like there's a lot there. And so I'd like to be able to practice this and have my license, but I don't know if I will be able to. Yeah, I'm on the fence about it. Yeah.
Well, thank you. It's good to have the therapist and the person working in the field doing professional therapy that's currently allowed, and is considered to be legal. That you're doing that work with ketamine and with psychotherapy. So thank you for sharing. We do have a couple of questions in the chat. One question for Sue was, are you seeing some kind of impact from the pharmaceuticals and the water supply that you mentioned, like the antidepressants? Are you seeing what you would describe as the impact in just your observations of people out there that don't realize they're on a healthy dose of antidepressants without their knowledge? Like, just out of curiosity, if you're observing anything that makes you realize that people are getting kind of affected by these pharmaceuticals, or is it more just the research? You had mentioned that issue. Had you observed anything?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. A couple of things. I have a very dear friend who is a water chemist for the state of Idaho, and he's involved with the testing of effluents as it goes into the water system. And for a long time, all of the testing has been on kind of the more sexy drugs that people are using and abusing, and things like cocaine, methamphetamine, those kind of things, and seeing that in the effluents. I know that there have been having some issues with some of the fish in one of the rivers in Idaho with caffeine. And my friend said that the effluents in Washington State, and specifically Seattle, we have a higher caffeine level in our water than any other place. So it's happening. It's there. What I know is happening as far as what's being done about that right now, a lot of the study is going to more drugs to see the increase in use in different areas, also for viruses and things like that, and to alert the health authorities when things like COVID is going to be hitting, and a lot was done during that. As far as people's knowledge, I think that this is not something that's talked about when we start anybody on a drug. We talk about if a patient is lucky, we talk about some of the side effects or things that they may or may not experience, but we don't really educate our patients on the more global effect of medications. So I don't think it's being well known at this point.
Okay, well, thank you for following up on that. That's fascinating. I find that fascinating. So Colby, who's a pharmacist, has joined us, and he's one of our panelists. He was just able to join us now. Welcome, Colby. Colby, we had everyone introduce themselves real briefly and just give a brief description about why you got into the plant medicine movement. If you don't mind catching folks up just so that we can include you in the next question, that would be great.
Oh, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Sorry for joining late. Just had some connectivity issues, but I don't think my camera is working right now, fortunately. But I am a pharmacist. I'm actually a Navy veteran. I was a corpsman in the Navy for 8 years. I went to pharmacy school. The Navy actually helped me pay for pharmacy school on a HSCP scholarship. So I went in as a pharmacist in the Navy after I completed that program, and then was, running the outpatient pharmacy at Camp Lejeune, which is a very large Marine Corps base in North Carolina. And just seeing, I think what got me interested in plant medicine was seeing the care that our veterans are getting, really firsthand, and on a mix of uppers and downers. And the average person with PTSD, I would say, in that setting is on a stimulant, they're on a sleep medicine, they're on mood stabilizer, they're on antidepressants. a benzodiazepine maybe, or an opioid, and all this cocktail medications, the pharmacy every month we're filling them. And I just started talking to the spouses, especially, who bear the most impact of this crisis we have of mental health and PTSD in our veterans. And I just didn't feel like we were helping. After a while, I'm like, I think we're just making people worse. Like, we're not really treating a problem. We're not solving any problem for them. So I started reading about, psychedelics, because I read about many veterans who are going to get care in Mexico and South America. And people said it was the only thing that's ever helped for them. After everything they tried in American pharmaceuticals and interventions, this was working. And so that got me interested in it. And I don't really practice in it yet as a career. I echo with, apologize, didn't get named, but was talking about licensure and worries about impacting their license. And that is something that, being these agents are still federally legal, is a bit worrisome. But I think there's a lot of healthcare professionals who want to do more in this space. And, we can for stuff like functional mushrooms that are legal. But in terms of the illegal plant medicine, that's still kind of a barrier.
Great. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to have someone with your experience on the line. So the next question for everyone, and if you're a panelist, just go ahead. It's totally fine if you kind of jump into the conversation while being respectful. But the next question here is, can you tell us about the best experience as a healer or as someone who's in the field of medicine that you've heard or been part of or witnessed as far as healing with these beneficial medicines? It doesn't have to be psilocybin, but that kind of is the focus. And then maybe one of the worst experiences or stories, like maybe if you saw someone with an ill-equipped healer or guide, and just maybe something you learned from kind of like how we learn from mistakes, or we learn from like a bad trip, like that you see negative stories out there too. And I think we want to honor that there are negative stories. Who feels Angela, you want to start?
Okay, may I jump in?
I have.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'll go real quick because I have so many stories. I love to tell them.
Okay.
I would say, for me, I have worked with a lot of people with mushrooms, and I would say that some of the most beautiful experiences have been with people at end of life, when they are maybe getting close to entering hospice, or maybe they have death with dignity drugs available to them. That has been some of the most profound peacemaking experiences for people. And that's been more than one, and just absolutely such an honor to hold space for people in that way. And I have seen a lot of problems with people that have been poorly held in expanded states or don't have proper education. What I've seen with poorly held states, and while I appreciate especially what Mira said around the gatekeeping and medicalization of psychedelics, which I don't agree with, even though this is a medical panel, there is a level of experience, training, and community like consult that we need to work together to improve our skill set as practitioners. I have seen people that have been quite harmed by people crossing ethical boundaries around touch, around consent, around manipulation, blurry boundaries that have been really difficult. And probably the worst thing that I have seen was with someone who was just really uninformed about psilocybin and was given some mushrooms and just thought she'd have a nice day sitting on her couch watching Disney movies and taking mushrooms. And she woke up in a hospital the next day where apparently she'd eaten the whole bag, knew nothing about it, and she was found outside in her cul-de-sac naked in the middle of the day screaming that she was dying, and was taken to the hospital. And thankfully she was safe and fine, but that is really why I feel like it's so important for us to have open, destigmatized conversations around this. So there's a lot of potential there, and there's also risk for harm, especially when the lack of education for either practitioners or for people that are experiencing these things when that information is not available to them.
Thank you. I'd like to show two brief videos, examples of one and the other, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, let's see. We learn how to share. Share. Okay. Share. And then go here. The first video is a 3-minute video. I've got a ton of videos and I'm trying not to take a lot of your time, but this is using plant medicine. And let's see.
My name is Rachel, and I'm 30 years old, and I just completed my session, my first MDMA session and 5 MEO. It was the most profound, I think, healing experience of my entire life. When I was younger, unconditional love was always preached, and I've never experienced it, but until today, I know what it feels like. I felt like the first time in my entire existence, I felt what real love feels like, and not a romantic, not in a sexual way. It was like I was so deep in myself that all the other things fall away. They're not as important. They're not as big as what our mind or the ego or whatever it is that like feeds on it. And then they want to make these little stories. And then I felt like my physical body has like protective layers up. And so I felt like my body was fighting, like releasing and letting go to just let it happen. And once I finally did, I was amazed. It was like I broke through that wall. And at first I was just kind of going through these events in my early childhood and in my life. And then at one point I was in embryo. Like I had memories of that with my mom, and she wasn't happy. I have so many memories that I've repressed from my childhood that like came up too. But it was just so beautiful to watch them and see them and not have it be traumatizing when you just feel this love. And I was able to like love myself and love my mom and love my dad through it and love my brothers and love everybody and forgive. Yeah. Yeah. That's the, because like now what I'm feeling with my mom, I have so much pent up stuff from her that I've allowed to like sit in me, not from her, but like that I've created and then took in and digested and kept inside my body. Resentment, anger, hate, stuff that it's been inside of me. And when I was on my journey, it was like, no, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. She was doing what she thought was best, and I'm here. Her purpose was to bring my soul into existence. That's what her purpose was. And she did it. And now I'm on my own journey, and it might not be what humans or what we think is the stereotypical relationship or connection, but it wasn't meant to be that ever. And it doesn't have to be that, but I can still love her through it and just feel like that's just.
And so the next video looks like a bad outcome, but if you listen to the words, you'll have a different impression. There's a person who was suicidal when she came, and the therapist brought her. And this is towards hour number 4. She did MDMA and didn't have a lot of response. This is using 5-MeO DMT. I'll speed through this a little bit. Hmm. Thank you. That's a smoke evacuator from the DMT. When you do this, you can see they're a cardiac monitor, not for safety, but it tells us how deep someone can go by looking at the breathing patterns. Mm, 112 pounds, by the way. That's a good word.
So much. Thank
Speed the video up a little bit for this part. Again, the words are the key to what happened.
you. See? Like I can. Oh my gosh.
I want to.
Fernando, I just want to make sure that you know that this is being broadcast on YouTube live.
That's fine. That's
Yeah,
fine.
and
I have permission by a written signed permission.
okay.
Now, if you
But I'm not sure how it relates to psilocybin decriminalization. We're talking about 5. We're talking like I'm not sure what we're illustrating here.
Oh my
we're getting
God.
to, well, okay, maybe.
Like I don't like physical touch, but at the same time, I just like
Okay, well, maybe it's not appropriate. You were talking about, this is mostly about 5-MeO DMT and the breakthrough that happens in spite of all the.
Yeah, but I believe this conversation is talking about psilocybin specifically and legalization and decriminalization within Washington state. So perhaps we could focus our conversation more in that direction.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Well,
actually would like to address one of these questions that was in the chat here, that
yeah.
I think I'm interested also in the other panelists' view or their
Mhm.
opinions on what integration would look like in a medical model, which is what the legislation is proposing, something a la like Oregon with the psilocybin clinics. A lot of my teachers, mostly it's from a perspective of like kind of underground world, like most of the times I've experienced these things. And I would like the biggest lesson that I've got is to when you need to integrate a big, powerful, transcendent experience, come back to your body, start first there, start with your with what you're eating, how you're moving your body, how you're sleeping. And this would integrating like that would be something very different than most people's experience with Western medicine. So I think that this question is quite appropriate, and we should really think about how we would do that before we start opening up psilocybin centers and giving people big, like, transformative doses, and then like here's a sheet on a good diet. So, but love to
would
hear
like,
some other folks' ideas.
I would like to jump in. I agree completely with you, Jonathan. Uh, just published in JAMA on December, let's see, it was December 5th. University of Washington physician, lead investigator Anthony Black just published a study that was done with psilocybin and clinicians experiencing burnout during COVID. And what I feel like this is absolutely appropriate, almost starting with our own before working with patients. I think I agree that we need to make sure that we're not just willy-nilly going out and opening up these clinics. I like the idea of bringing in other trained professionals besides Western medical model. But I think that the work is already starting to be done, and it's being done within kind of the medical community. I think that as we work farther to integrate this, I agree with also with what you said, Jonathan. We are recognizing that just as important as the general health of our patients, right? What are they eating? What are they sleeping? And all of that. And I think this just dovetails on with that same more holistic look, but it will take work.
Yeah, Colby, did you want to weigh in? We have two questions in the chat that I've been trying to get to, folks. That one was, I had them written down here for a second. Let's see here. And Sharon as well, if you want to jump in. The questions were on integration, and if you scroll up, you can see them a little bit. But Colby, maybe you could start us out. As far as the questions, it was around struggling with SSRIs, preventing like a psilocybin experience for those people that are in the SSRI, being on SSRIs, and then also looking at integration and getting support with the medical model were some of the other questions. You might have to scroll up a little bit to see them, but there's about 3 there that I'd be happy to have any of the panelists jump into. Colby, if you don't mind starting, I don't know if you can see some of those questions.
Yeah, there was a question about, has anyone struggled with SSRIs preventing psilocybin? Been on SSRIs for about 20 years. No amount of psilocybin did anything for me. Very true that there seems to be a few ways that SSRIs can interfere with the extent or effects, of psilocybin. It seems as if long-term use SSRIs, and I can get back and provide some studies on this. I don't have them right in front of me right now, but it seems to be that the long-term use of SSRIs can deplete the number of serotonin receptors where psilocybin binds to, the 5-HT2A receptors. So that is why there's not as much availability for psilocybin to bind those receptors, where it seems to be that people have a blunted response to psilocybin. And the downside of that is that even after you stop taking SSRI, it can take quite a while for those receptors to upregulate again. It's not as if saying that I stop SSRI today and tomorrow I'm going to try it and, I'll be having the same effects as someone who's never been on SSRI. It takes like months for the body to recover those effects. And you have agents like fluoxetine, which has a longer half-life, where you're going to notice even longer effect potentially for people that are coming off of that medication. So that's what the literature says. And the integration question is a little bit different. That would be, I guess, there is potentially some. I know ketamine is a different drug than psilocybin, but perhaps looking at what ketamine clinics have done in the medical model, I know there's some that do have integration sessions after the experience, and that could be a framework we can carry over with psilocybin. I did read that study about psilocybin helping for doctors deal with post-COVID trauma, and that was a very interesting insight into that. So there's some takeaways there I think we can gather. But that's just my thought around the drug interaction issue, which is, a lot of people are on SSRIs, so that's definitely a significant interaction. SNRIs bind the serotonin receptor as well, so you're not necessarily going to notice a different effect with those. Everything I've read seems consistent. We were talking about Effexor, Cymbalta, not having any different effects than fluoxetine or sertraline and causing this blunting of the psilocybin experience.
Thank you so much. Sharon, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, and speaking on integration, that's a conversation that I think medical professionals really need to start having now, because I do think that eventually, I do believe that psilocybin will be integrated into a lot of things in our medical model that I think there's a lot lacking in our current medical model space. I can only speak for my own experience, but when I participated in that clinical trial, which wasn't therapeutic, but I did have a psychiatrist assigned to me. I had their phone number 24/7. They were available. But we did not vibe. And this person was somebody that was credentialed, did everything right, fully competent, licensed professional. But when you're dealing with somebody that's in this altered state, you do need to that person that is in that state of, I do believe, needs to feel a connection with that provider. And that provider needs to understand that you're not going to connect with everybody. And there has to be like a little less ego, where if you feel like there isn't a great connection, this isn't going to be a relationship that's going to work out and be therapeutic. Because if I happened to, like, all throughout the clinical trial, I was given psilocybin, I was put in an MRI machine again and again and again, very large doses. If something would have went awry, I wouldn't have felt comfortable with the person that was assigned to me. And that was my first view into this space and how it's really, really important for there to be integration, but also the integrator to have a developed relationship with the patients. I don't know the answer, the solution. I think it's kind of like dating, like you got to like just hang out with them a couple of times and see if there's a connection where you feel like you can help that person integrate. But you're not going to be for everybody. No provider is going to be for everyone. And our current medical model is just where we just assign somebody to a psychiatrist and then there you go. And this isn't like that. Um, those are my personal feelings about it, but I don't have any solutions, which is frustrating. That's it.
No, I appreciate that. I had also asked in the chat as far as having anger towards any of your peers in the medical community. Does anyone of you feel like answering that question about any kind of anger towards like folks that seem closed-minded that are in the medical field that just don't seem into the research, and you're like, this is groundbreaking. This is like we're hitting our heads against the wall about all these different issues.
I'd love to speak to that.
Yeah.
As a nurse, one of our roles
Yeah.
is collaboration throughout the fields. And anger is not going to win anybody over. The reality is, nurses, our role is bridge builders between people who are receiving care and their care providers, because we can really translate a lot, whether that be to a medical provider or a variety of care providers. I find that's one of the reasons I started a psychedelic nursing training, is to help educate nurses more fully within the field. I think all of us as practitioners have a duty not only to help educate, but also to hold ourselves as beacons of ethical behavior and practice in order to win over other practitioners. And we also need to realize that many of us that are supporting psychedelic care are in a bit of an echo chamber. We need to really take the critiques around psychedelic care seriously, and we need to listen to them, because there's points that they're making that we have to think about. So that's really important. But anger is not going to get you anywhere.
Right on. I appreciate you answering that question. Sharon, did you want to finish in regards to that one issue, or?
Well, just to piggyback off of what Angela said, I mean, I think my personal anger in this was that the frustration I felt with not being able to express what it was that I experienced and what was happening to medical professionals that don't believe in the power of these compounds. Um, I think, yeah, anger should never be the go-to. That was what I felt at that time, but rather see it as an opportunity. Yet, if you don't have the knowledge and the education about these compounds, which a lot of people are lacking in, you're not going to be able to use that opportunity or take advantage of it, right? Like you have to be armed with education in order to dismantle this and kind of pick away at what it is that people don't believe in. I've met psychiatric nurse practitioners